Right, well, welcome to this third session on what I'm calling the advanced classroom because I'm giving out information that I've never given out before, and I'm giving the details of my interactions with higher dimensional beings and what they told me. But I'm also, which is important, that I'm giving the information of my own responses and how I felt at the time. Because when I woke up, I was hardly a candidate for this kind of thing. I'd been a pretty naughty guy and was very much into drugs, sex, drugs, and rock and roll and partying and misbehaving generally as much as I could, as the Irish usually do. And so I was hardly a candidate for this kind of mission that at the time I felt, but later on I learned why I was given this opportunity. And it has a lot to do with, my ancestry, my genetic makeup, my my soul history, and the contracts that I'd made before I incarnated here. So, in my first session, I talked about the first three journeys that I undertook, and then I spoke a little bit about the journey I undertook in April of 2006, which was my first encounter with my higher self, Aizme, who would then be my constant companion with me over a period of time. In fact, till 2004, we had daily contact, and I asked a lot of questions, and he appreciated the fact that I asked questions, because he once told me that when you ask a questions, it opens up the frequency to receive the answer. Because if you're not open to an answer, you probably won't get it. So he told me that because I asked a lot of questions and I genuinely wanted to know, he was quite happy to answer all my questions. And then I spoke about how I first met him on Sirius B, and then how I saw a group of about 30 other beings who were also blue avians, and amongst them were the gold and silver ones. They were called gold and silver ones because they've got long golden hair. It's not quite blonde, it actually looks golden. And they wear these robes that are, light emanates from the robe, so it's translucent material, and they're quite beautiful. But all of them were very tall. But they're not all the same size. I noticed that some blue avians were about 8 feet tall, and there were some that were 12 feet tall, and in between they ranged between those heights. But the gold and silver ones were all about 10 to 12 feet tall. They were very quiet, very reserved, very shy people, very respectful, very loving, and they were part of a community on Sirius B called the Azurites. The Azure coming from the word azure means blue in Latin, azure, and so they called the Azurites because they're the blue people. Their skins are blue, they have blue feathers on their body. They're not covered entirely with blue feathers. There's a lot of skin showing, but they have feathers in different parts of their bodies. But they were all very loving and kind beings, and being in their presence was an awesome experience for me, because up until I think that time, I was very skeptical about this notion of love. because I'd been through, two divorces, and I'd always embraced the notion of love, but I'd never really felt it. In fact, most of my life I'd felt pretty unloved. But being amongst them was the first time I actually palpably felt the feeling of being loved and being in the presence of love, where everything around me was just so loving and kind and gentle and respectful, and it was an awesome experience. And I woke up in 2003, and this was April 2006. But in between 2003 and this particular experience I had other experiences that I'll cover in future videos, but I wanted to get to the Sirius B experience because that was the point at which I really changed. And I'm going to be speaking about the second journey I undertook to Sirius B, which was really the life-changing experience for me. But some of the things I noticed when I was there, in fact, very quickly I noticed that the sky looked a little different. There were no clouds in the sky. There was no sun in the sky, but there was light everywhere. There were no shadows. We experience a lot of shadows in our world, but everything emits light. So everything is part of the light system there. Everything is energy, and it all emits light. So there are no shadows. There's no sun. There are no clouds. And I asked, like, why don't you have clouds? Doesn't it rain here? And they said, no, we can just create mist. And the mist, the moisture in the mist actually feeds any vegetation. But an interesting thing that I also observed was there wasn't the variety of vegetation that we have on this planet. So I asked about that. I said, you have a lot of vegetation. There is a lot of vegetation there. And the vegetation is a little different from ours, because there the vegetation is palpably conscious. So as you walk through Sirius B, the flowers will actually follow you and turn in as if they're watching you. And when you approach them, they will move either backwards or forward, depending on your energy and what they want. So it's a completely different kind of experience there. And I asked about that, and my ISME explained to me that we have more diversity on our planet than any other planet in the universe, and that when the third seeding of Earth took place about 243,000 years BC, there had been an agreement reached between the Elohai Elohim races and various other race groups, but particularly the Syrians of Sirius B and the Pleiadians, who became the protagonists for the reseeding of Earth. And the Syrians are very good at genetics. They're very much into the sciences, whereas the Pleiadians are more into the magnetic energies of emotion and caring and loving and guardianship, protecting. There are two different kinds of intelligence. The one's emotional intelligence, and the other one's thought intelligence, logic intelligence. and both are necessary for creation and creative work. So the two worked together to create the genetics and bring them all together on planet Earth. And they didn't tell me this at the time, but I've since discovered that that was quite a remarkable feat, because they had to balance everything, because they had to balance the waters, the sky, the winds, the rotation of the earth. They had to balance the flora with the fauna, and the fauna with the flora, and then all the other species on our planet, the insects, the microbial forms here, that, you know, that we have an amazing array of microbials, and you know, I've done some research on microbial forms on this planet, and we have about 284 different species of microbials on this planet, and many of them are in our bodies. That's why I kind of smiled inwardly when they told us about the coronavirus and what a terrible thing it was. And I thought, how stupid. Everybody's filled with coronaviruses. Our bodies are filled with viruses and bacteria and germs. They are necessary in order to be part of our immune system. And our immunity, our immune system, is there to keep us healthy. Because what they do is they ward off any because you get good bacteria and harmful bacteria. So the good bacteria looks after the harmful bacteria. And I won't go into too much there, but you can understand how intricate this whole process was to create this balance between humans and the species around them. And when they created humans, they created different race groups. They created the white, black, red, and yellow different race groups. But within those different race groups, they also had different genetic signatures that were part of our genetic code that made us not look all the same, but we had slight differences. And so humans took on a humanoid form, but they had certain genetic differences within them that had been brought together by the Syrian blue avians and the Pleiadians. And there was a lot of negotiation that happened between the Syrians and the Pleiadians. And another interesting thing he told me was, because I was curious as to why they were even interested in planet Earth, because they seemed to have a wonderful, existence where they were on Sirius. And what they told me was that in the soul evolutionary process, okay, I won't go into too much of that, but some of you might have done my courses now where I speak of that and I go through the detail of what soul evolution is. But in their own soul evolutionary process, once they get to the higher dimensional states of dimensions 10, 11, and 12, they can only enter and evolve into the God worlds of dimensions 13, 14, and 15 if they can incorporate all their different cells. So by them donating DNA to us, what they did is, because DNA is part of our part of them, that they contributed towards us. So it's part of their consciousness, and so it becomes part of their soul evolution as well. So the reason why all these different ET groups are very interested in the Earth is because in their own soul evolutionary process, they need to recover and restore all those bits of themselves that, and they need to recover them intact in order to ascend into the dimensions 13, 14, and 15 to what is known as the God worlds. And that's part of the whole evolutionary process, and everything on the planet is in a soul evolutionary process, and everything that is manifest has a soul template. We have a soul template, and it's called the Universal Creation and Design Template, but it's also called the Divine Blueprint. Some people speak about the Divine Blueprint, and they're the same thing, but basically. And the Divine Blueprint works at all levels, and at all scales, and in all dimensions. And it's a replicable system, so it can be replicated many, many times over. And we hold within our soul the basic template of the 12-stranded angelic humans that were created here 243,000 years ago. Now we hold that that blueprint within our soul bodies. But what the fallen ones did here, they corrupted our genetics by introducing the Nephilim into our societies. And they also did genetic experiments on humans by removing one strand of DNA. We used to be 3-stranded DNA beings, but they removed one strand, so we only had 2 strands. So our full connection between our soul bodies and our physical bodies was lost, so that we could only remember about 90% of our soul. We could only recover about 10% of our soul memory. So in a sense, it's like a computer that's being corrupted, where the hard drive now has been reduced to 10% of its capacity, and the rest of the information is still there, but it's not accessible. So, I was very awestruck having this experience and seeing all these things, and these beings are androgynous, so they're neither male or female. They don't have any organs. They're breatharian, so they don't have lungs. They live off the energy around them, and in a sense, what they told me was they circulate the energy in and out. So they become one with energy, and the kind of energy that they experience is called etheric energy, which is different from the energy we experience here, which is kinetic, or we have to burn things in order to create energy. Whereas Nikola Tesla understood this, and the electricity he was able to create was basically by understanding etheric energy, that energy is available all over around us if we just knew how to harness it. And Tesla understood how to harness it. So he was able to generate enormous amounts of electricity, in his laboratory. And there are photographs of Tesla sitting in his laboratory surrounded by lightning, which he sits reading a book with all this lightning and crackling going on around him, which is quite amazing, because he knew that etheric energy cannot harm you. Etheric electricity cannot harm you. So it's not like our kinetic energy that once it's earthed, you get a shock. Etheric energy is quite different from kinetic energy. So they live off energy. They don't mate. as we do, but they do have what are called procreation ceremonies. And I was invited while I was there. There was going to be a procreation ceremony, so I was invited to attend, and they explained to me what was going to happen during their procreation ceremony. And effectively what it is, they called it, it's like, they had a special name for it. We don't have it in English here. But they form a formation which is similar to the Cathara grid. I don't know if you know the Cathara grid, which is the 12 dimensional points in the soul template. And they form a formation like that, but it's north, south, east, west. So it forms what they called an omniverse, something like that. But effectively, they called it a ruche. And what they did is they told me that what they were going to do is raise the frequency of all the people in the ceremony, taking part in the ceremony, to a heightened pitch, and that at a certain point, when the frequency was high enough, two blue avians, one who'd agreed to carry the female energy of magnetic energy, and the other one who'd agreed to be the male to give the electric energy, these two beings would walk into each other. And they are etheric beings, so they don't have solid bodies like we can. They can walk through walls and so on. But normally they don't walk into each other except in this sacred ceremony of procreation. And so I attended that and watched the ceremony. I didn't participate in the ceremony, I just was allowed to watch it. And it was quite amazing how they did it. They had drums beating, and they had cymbals and triangles that they beat. They also sang, but they didn't sing like we sing. They almost sang at a different harmonic resonance. I'm a musician, so I'm used to how music flows and how music is created. But for their music was quite different, and their songs were quite different, and they emitted a lot of sound tones, like the four first creation sound tones are Kara, ya, sa, ta. So there's 5 terms. Kara, ya, sa, ta, kara, ya, sa, ta, kara, ya, sa, ta, kara, ya, sa, ta. And the first letter of each of those, Kryst, spells Christ. And that's where the name of Christ comes from the Kryst, first creation sound tones. And the God worlds are also called the Christic tones. And this Christic consciousness is very, very important to the beings on Sirius B. Not like here, and I've been doing a few posts on this lately, that for us, righteous living is optional. So you can be righteous or not righteous. For them, there is no optionality. You only have that one option, which is to be righteous, to live righteously. They consider the optionality that we have here to be dualistic. In other words, it creates a dualistic mindset. It separates the mind, and it separates our minds from our hearts, and it separates us from each other. So a Christic consciousness is very important to them. So they would make these beats, and they would chant as Kara Yasata, 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 Tara Tara Yasata, Kara Yasata, and they would go on like that, and the drums beating in the background, and the cymbals going, and they would also dance. They would spin their bodies around and round, and the they did it in order, kind of an order where the person next to you would spin clockwise, and the next person would spin anti-clockwise, and the next person would spin clockwise, and the next person would spin anti-clockwise. And effectively what they were doing is creating standing scalar waves of energy by spinning their bodies. In fact, that's one of the things I had to do in order to raise my frequencies before I could go to Sirius B. I had to do spinning of my body so that I would be able to create electric and magnetic energies. Electric energies spin clockwise and magnetic energies spin anti-clockwise. That's why our Earth goes around the Sun in an anti-clockwise position, because it's primarily magnetic energies. If you look at the universe, the spirals of the different galactic systems all spiral in either clockwise or anti-clockwise, mostly clockwise, which, it denotes the direction of the spin, believe it or not, is very important, because it creates a different kind of energy. So I had to learn how to do that before I could go to Sirius B, and so I understood what they were doing when they were dancing like that and creating these standing scalar waves of energy. And then the drum beat got faster and faster and faster and faster, and then it got to such a pitch that my heart was beating inside me, and I was breathing fast, and I was almost having difficulty catching my breath. And then the drums suddenly stop, and everybody stops, and these two beings walk into each other, and when they do it, they spark up, they light up with a kind of toroidal structure, and it's the most amazing thing to see. But when that happens, everyone there has a kind of an orgasm, and I had that as well. Literally, you feel this energy so strongly that everybody just falls down because it's so strong, and it takes a while for everyone to recover from that. But everyone's very happy. They dance as they leave, and they smile, and they congratulate each other, and they hug each other, and they sing as they leave, and they have different ways of expressing joy. They do a lot of dancing there. Quite often, as I walked amongst them, I would see a group of beings, 3 beings or 6 beings dancing around, and some would have an inner circle, and some would have an outer circle, and they would dance in different directions. Some would dance clockwise and others anti-clockwise. So it was quite an amazing experience to have that. And then I asked about what happens to the child that is procreated within the female energy, and they told me that the gestation period would be 7 years. So the female energy would hold this being within them, and it would form within them, And I asked them to explain that to me, and they said it's like the Russian dolls we have on planet Earth, where you have one doll opens up and it has one doll in it, and another doll inside that one doll, and there's another doll inside that doll. So it's like layers of energy that have to be created in order to bring this being into um, into the dimensions eight, nine, and ten. Six, seven, eight, and nine. So it needs 3 layers of energy. And they told me that the being who's going to incarnate there will have been someone who has come from a lower dimension, dimensions 4, 5, and 6, who is ready to ascend into a higher dimension. And it's part of something they call the first fruits of ascension, which I think Jesus talked about as well, that there are different ascensions. There's the first fruits and then the final ascension. And many beings ascend in that way. And then they are the being that is incarnated in a higher dimension. I found that quite fascinating, actually, how the whole ceremony worked and how people took to it. Other things that I asked about why there were no animals there, why I didn't see any insects, and they said that there were animals on Sirius B, but they have their own colonies, and they tend to keep to themselves. They don't mix with the blue avians, because they have different levels of energy, and so the blue avians are very careful not to harm or damage the soul templates of other beings like animals who they consider to be fairly advanced beings. I later saw other different species on my second visit to Sirius B, but I'll cover that in my next video. But suffice it to say, there are different leonine species, there are insect species, there are reptile species, there are draconian species, and for every species of being we have on Earth, that's how many different species of aliens and extraterrestrials there are. And I once saw them gathered together when I attended a Galactic Council meeting. I was allowed to attend that, not as a participant, but as an observer on my second journey, where they were discussing the whole Earth rescue mission. And it was a wonderful experience, but there are so many different other species of beings out there. There's some who are in higher dimensions who have animal or vegetable bodies. There are such things as talking trees, talking and walking trees. So when I saw that in that movie that about the Hobbit, I really smiled about that, because it reminded me that yes, they do exist. And I don't know how J.R. Tolkien understood that, or how that came into his imagination, but it just tells me that we have all this information within us, and they told me that within our soul bodies we have all this information, but we have just forgotten it. And they often used to tell me that I am not learning information, I am remembering information, because it's all in there. And so they would often remind me that they were just reminding me about the information, because they know it's already existed within me, that it exists in our soul body. Now, we don't really understand memory on this planet. There's been many researchers and scientists researching where memory is stored in the body, and they all agree that memory is not stored in the brain. The only part of the brain that stores memory is the hippocampus, which only stores short-term memory, which is about 24 to 48 hours of information, and they don't know. Science here doesn't really know where memory is stored, but memory is stored in our soul, because we are going to learn that because our science has begun to discover what holographic memory is, and they are creating holographic processors in new hollow computers, which are going to introduce a whole different kind of technology here. But it's existed for a long time in other dimensional spaces. Talking about holograms, they were able to teach me things by creating a hologram. They would show me just in the air. They would show me pictures to illustrate what they were trying to teach me. So I would just look up and I would have this little hologram in front of me, and I would see people, animals, situations, history, all kinds of things that they could just conjure up like magicians, create holograms. And they are masters of holography, so they taught me a lot about holograms and holography and how it works. And our science is getting there. We're starting to be able to create holograms more effectively. But and once we understand holograms, we'll understand our reality, because our reality is a hologram. And what they told me is that we are the creators of our hologram. We are in fact creator beings, and all that information, the designs, patterns, and patents for the holograms are within our soul bodies. We have just forgotten how to use that technology. And so we actually do use it, but we're so unaware that we are creating our own reality that we never taught that here. We are told that things just happen to you. So we take on this mantle of being a victim, and we think we are victims of circumstances, and circumstances create our reality. But it's not so. We actually create our own reality, and it's by our compliance with the indoctrination that we've been given here that makes us create a hologram that is not of our choosing. So we are creating a false hologram which has been designed by the fallen angelics to keep us locked into a reality that neither serves us but it serves them. So the holograms are very important. I do this in my courses. I speak a lot about holograms, and I've also got a course called Mastering the Hologram, so that we can learn how to master the hologram. Now, to get to Sirius B in the higher dimensions of dimensions 7, 8, and 9, I was told that I would have to raise my frequencies, and I didn't understand what they were talking about, so I asked a lot of questions about it. What do you mean by raising my frequencies? And they explained that our soul bodies are fields of energy, and to go into higher dimensions, it's like watching a TV program. You're watching a program, but at the same time the other programs running on your network at the same time. And when you change to another program, you are changing the frequency of the electromagnetic waves coming into the television, And so when you change a frequency, you have a different experience, or you have a different program coming up. Well, that's kind of how dimensionality works. And in order to take my soul body up into a higher frequency, I had to do certain things in order to raise my frequencies, so that I could have that experience in dimensions 7, 8, and 9. And I'll deal with this a bit more in the next video on how to raise your frequencies and what that's all about. Um, but having said that, we've just about covered 50 minutes. I would like to give you an opportunity to ask any questions, to make any comments you'd like to make, or to you know contribute in any way you feel you would like to. So you can unmute your mics and talk away.
Hello, Colin.
Hi, Dinah. Go ahead.
Hi. I'm wondering, are you aware of how many others like yourself might be here at this point?
Yeah, there are quite a few of us. When I was doing grid work, they told me that there were 144,000 grid workers on the planet. So there are a lot of grid keepers, beings who are awake, the way showers, their teachers, um, there are the carers. There are many people on this planet who are awake. But I found people like Ashiana Dean, very interesting, very awake, very good information. Um, let's see who else. Marina Jacobi also gives good information, although it's slightly different from mine. Not different in the sense that it's different, but she uses different terms. And that's the thing with all of us way shows and so on. We don't all speak the same language. There are people who talk about dimensions and densities, and they get mixed up and they confuse densities and dimensions. So they don't get the terminology exactly the same, and that is a bit confusing if you've learned from me about what dimensions and densities are, and you get someone else talking about dimensions, but they use the term density. So it is a bit confusing for people, but one has to do one's own research and, sort it out for yourself in your own mind.
Thank you.
But there are many of us here. But having said that, in 2003, when I first started to wake up, uh, there wasn't anybody that I could find online. There were people like David Icke and David Wilcock, who I watched their videos and read some of their stuff, but they weren't actually giving the kind of detail or the mechanics of how things worked. And they were also confusing the terms density and dimension, and some of their terminology was not accurate. But when I found Ashiana Dean, who I first knew as Anna Hayes, she wrote a very good book called Voyagers 2, which I recommend you read if you. It's a very high level book, um, much higher level information than I give. Um, and I asked my higher selves about that. I said, is it important for me to learn this what information she's giving? She said, no, it's important to understand it, but we want you to teach people at a lower level. So they wanted me to get a level of understanding of the information, but to be able to describe it in ordinary English and use words that are fairly common here. So because when you get into Ashiana's books, she talks about, uses words which are off-planetary words, and but the concepts are all the same, though. It's just different terminology.
So there would be many, many, many out here who are quietly holding the energy also, correct?
Yeah, yeah. Look, there's some very high-level people out there that I come across lately. I just can't remember all their names, but yeah. So there's some really great information out there. Laurie Ladd, I think her name is, also giving lots of good information. Yeah, and you see, the universe is a big place, and there are different ET groups who are interested in this planet. I asked my higher selves why don't they come and show themselves here, and they said, well, first of all, they're afraid of humans because we're so unstable, but also if they showed themselves, it might be considered an act of war against other extraterrestrial groups. So they prefer to keep neutral at this time until all the groups, ET groups, the galactic groups, agree on who's going to be the delegation to represent them when they reveal themselves. And I was told sometime in 2014 that they think they've got the right delegation, because it's important that they send a delegation that look human. They don't want to send a delegation here that look like lizards or, praying mantises or bears or lions, because that would scare humans. So they're thinking of people, who have other beings, race groups, who have humanoid appearances, then look human. Um, some of them look human, but they're very tall, so that might be a little scary for people. So they, they're going to try to see that the people they choose for this are more or less the same size as humans. But it's very difficult. Most of the Nordics I met are very tall, 8 foot tall beings. Um, the gold and silver ones are 10 to 12 feet tall. Um, but there are many other human-looking ET groups out there. So yeah, when they do reveal themselves, we will probably see them as humans. But they already exist among us. There are many extraterrestrial beings who are living amongst humans at the moment. We just don't recognize them because they are they look human. They look fully human. They might have some differences, but one thing that gives it away is if they've lived for a very long time without aging. So that gives them away. So they don't stay here for very long.
Thank you.
Lynn, this is Christine. How are you?
Hi, Christine.
Hey, could you explain what your experience is like from like when you begin to, do you go etherically to these places, or I'm sure you don't take your body. How does it work? Are you in meditation and then etherically you're there?
Well, they told me the first two encounters I had with Maha was physical. I actually saw him physically in the room, and that was very intimidating for me. So they told me they're going to come in my sleep state. But sleep state is no different from a wake state, really. It's just your wake state is more of a conscious state, whereas a sleep state is more of an unconscious state. And a lot of the information that is held in our unconscious mind, they're able to work with more successfully than with our conscious minds, because our conscious minds tend to have a lot of um, you know, nonsense or rubbish in them. Um, so if I wanted to contact them, I would contact them telepathically. Um, and But once you get used to that, you, I started to have frequent kind of messages coming through, and I would give messages to them, and it becomes like talking, having a friend, and you just talk to each other all the time, and whenever you want to. Um, Once you've they have what is called a dial-in sequence. So once you learn to certain techniques to dial into, and these are just sound tones that you emit, that will enable you to contact your higher selves. But remember, your higher self is just you in a higher state of consciousness. It's just the same personality. Uh, One of the things that told me there are 1,728 versions of ourselves in different dimensions in the universe. The universe is a very big place. So when you contacting your higher self, you're contacting that aspect of yourself which has been freed from the corruption that exists here. And you go into a state of consciousness with that other being, so you become consciously aware. We can't reach them with the current consciousness we have, because our consciousness here is flawed. So we have to, and raising one consciousness involves living a life where you have the highest standards and values, where you're careful about your thoughts and emotions, and you have to have an attitude, that is the attitude of mastery. And so one has to learn new attitudes. You have to raise your standards and what is acceptable to you as a standard, even though others around you may not adhere to that standard. It's a standard you determined for yourself, that you're going to live by that standard. For instance, in 2006, after my second journey, which I'll tell you about next week, my mantra and the standard that I was going to use for my life was, anything less than love is not acceptable, neither to me or from me. So, and it was very difficult in the beginning to always do that, because there were times I got angry, there were times that I felt annoyed with people, there were times where people came to me in anger and they were angry with me, and I would react to it. So it was difficult to master that standard. But over the years, I've learned how to do that. It's just a question of practice, when people are upset around me now, I understand sovereignty. So if someone else is upset, that's their business. It's got nothing to do with me. Yeah, I allow people to be whoever they are and to say whatever they want to say and do whatever they want to do. It's not my business. That's their business. So I just look after my own business and let other people look after their business. And if they don't, that's none of my business.
Are you saying then that these standards to elevate yourself, are they set in a higher realm, or are they standards we come up with? Because there's so much variation in the world of what a high standard is,
Yeah,
and no standards.
yeah. I researched standards and values, and I came up with a list of about 102, 103 different standards and values that I felt were worthy of, following. Things like determination, courage, diligence, discipline, impeccability, and you just I used that list as a kind of a score sheet for myself, when I first drew that list up, I used to go through it regularly and say, well, have I shown determination? Have I shown courage today? Have I been disciplined? Have I been delighted with things around me? Have I been joyous and you know, have, and then you get the things, you have to recognize things like controlling behavior and how people want to control other people. It's a very sad thing, but there are many beings on this planet who have a controlling, nature, and it's acceptable for them to tell people how to live their lives and what they should be doing, and to judge them if they don't do that. And that's very contra indicative of raising one's frequency. So raising one's frequencies is serious business. But once you get into it and you raise your frequencies, you will have amazing experiences. I have a niece who's been doing this for a little while now, and she's having amazing experiences in her life, big changes, people around her changing, herself changing, having communication with other dimensional beings. Today I spoke to a lady in South Africa who I've never met before, and she contacted me and she told me that just recently she's been having dreams about ETs and UFOs and things. So many people are, and what I told her is all that information, that is you waking up to yourself, to your higher potential, to your heroic probability. It already exists within us. We just haven't activated that aspect of ourselves that is of a higher dimension. Because remember, we still hold a template in our soul bodies of the dimensions 4, 5, and 6. We fell from the second harmonic down to the first harmonic, or the second density to the first density, but we still hold in our soul templates the 12-strand potential of the of the of the, what do they call them, avatar being. Your next level is avatar, and the next level after that is the rishi state of consciousness. So we have the the, the capability within our soul bodies. So we have to work within the soul, work within, do the work within, and raise your consciousness that way. Looking out at this world, it's a sore mess. So it's not going to help you to raise your consciousness. Become self-aware. Be aware of your thoughts, your emotions, your words, your actions, how you express your thoughts and emotions. Question your stands and values. Was this the situation I in? Did I participate in a way that would raise the frequencies of not only myself but the others in the room? So, we are so service to self-conscious on this planet that we don't realize that the universe is all about service to others. We're supposed to be service to self, service to each other, and service to the universe, which means service to Earth, our planet Earth. We are guardians of our planet, but we don't act like guardians. We don't behave like guardians. We're not conscious of our guardianship on the planet. Guardianship over the animals, the plants, the vegetation, the insects, the wind, the sun, the rain, all of that. We are supposed to be guardians of that. And one of the things I learned was rainmaking and how to make rain, that we are capable of actually producing and changing the weather, but we just have forgotten how to do that. And I always laugh because when I was still in my party days, my friends used to sing this song to me: everywhere you go, you always take the party with you. Everywhere you go, You always take the party. And just as a joke, there was a song by, I've forgotten the group's name, the Australian group, and they say, everywhere you go, you take the weather with you. And I laughed when I learned about how to make weather. It's just, you take the weather with you. You know, so we are far greater and more capable than we imagine ourselves to be. Um, you know, there was a time that I raised my frequency so high that you know, I used to blow light bulbs. My car wouldn't start, my computer wouldn't work, and destroyed my hard drive and things like that just because of my own frequencies got so high. So I had to learn to bring them down. So while everyone else is raising their frequencies, I'm trying to keep mine down. Because if I raised them any higher, I'd blow these light bulbs again. And it wouldn't make my landlady very happy. Any other questions or comments? Did you do? Have you been through the Cave of Healing Waters journey? Yeah. I'm going to be doing a couple of other journeys that I was put through that I think might be helpful to you as well. So I'll start next week. I'll do another one of those journeys. It's awakening to the higher self. It's a technique that's used, and we can do that together next week. Any more questions, comments? Sue, you want to say something?
Yeah, just briefly, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Tanya? Yeah, okay, just what you were saying, I've been listening a lot to Elena Denham, and she wrote a book, I've got it, A Gift from the Stars, Alien Races, and she's done drawings of all the different alien races. And also Alex Collier talks a lot about the Andromedans. So it all ties in with your, you know, the same as what you're saying. It's fascinating. Just
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, when you begin to explore the universe, it really widens the scope of one's understanding, you know, of the universe, and also who we are, and what our place is in the universe, and what we're doing here, and what our purpose is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's fascinating. Love all this stuff, Colin. It's great. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other comments, questions? Nope. Okay, well, folks, that's it. Thank you for attending, and I really appreciate it. This recording will be up later tonight and in my time, and it'll be on my Patreon page, and it'll also be uploaded to all my students will get a copy. So yeah, if you like to watch it again, it'll be available there. And also, if you want to share it, feel free to share it. You know, it's I think worthwhile information that people need to hear on this planet, because things are beginning to change rapidly on the planet. And I want people's consciousness to be comfortably aware of what is happening and the changes that are taking place, so that they can go through it seamlessly and without too much trauma to their consciousness. And if you understand what's going on, it'll be seamless. You'll just fly through it. Yeah. Okay, love you all. See you next week. Thank you. Bye-bye.